Welcome back, everyone, to round 5 of the third weekly of the Eternal Tournament Series Season 3. We are jumping right into game here with VSarius on what I believe is 4-faction control against ZoochZ, who is on Xenon control, which is a very interesting archetype that doesn't technically exist, but I know a few players in the past have tried to build it. This is a very cool deck, though.
Yeah, it's not really a deck you could. It's hard to play this kind of deck on ladder because you have a lot of reactive elements, and if you choose the wrong ones, you're going to get heavily punished for it. But in a tournament where you have to a sideboard, you get to fine tune these things, fix things post sideboard, so it becomes a much more defensible tournament deck.
Yeah, very true. Control definitely favored after you get access to sideboarding, since they can tailor their package a little more towards what type of threats your opponent is playing and kind of counteract their deck as best as they can.
And we see that VSarius and ZoochZ both are playing pretty slow. ZoochZ is going to be able to deploy Sandstorm Titan here, get initiative. VSarius is going to be able to vanquish it on the following turn, leaving both players with not a whole lot of productivity.
Yeah, VSarius just taking the game very slow, and Zooch is kind of in the position where even though he also is the control deck, he's trying to get aggressive. This could be a very interesting game. It's going to depend on who hits their power consistently, because the last word might actually be very important in this game. It might be how Zooch wins this game.
Oh yeah, I would certainly assume for the last word to play a pretty big role. And this Steward of Prophecy is actually a pretty unique card. You don't see it played a lot. It gets to silence a creature in the enemy hand, and we do see that the options are Seraph and Desert Marshal. It looks like Zooch elected to make Seraph just a 3/4, no text, deal with the Desert Marshal later. So that is actually a very powerful effect. Now, VSarius is down a win condition, and the deck doesn't have very many.
Yeah, that is very true. VSarius does lose a bit of his steam in his hand since this Seraph does get silenced. I do think it is interesting that the Desert Marshal didn't get silenced. I guess Zooch isn't too worried about any of his threats getting silenced, but I thought maybe taking away the ambush would have been useful since you have the last word. But clearly choosing to remove the win con, and it seems to be working out decently well for him here. Both players having interesting hands. Zooch, I would argue, with the much stronger hand here currently.
Yeah, certainly the Shadowlands Feaster coming down is going to be a pretty potent threat. And then the Sabotage off the top is huge. They get to choose either Harsh Rule or sort of the Sky King to deal with whichever one they think is better. I think that they're going to take the Harsh Rule here. It deals with both the Steward and the Shadowlands Feaster, whereas the sort of the Sky King you can pressure with both of them. So it's actually an interesting decision.
Yeah, it is an interesting decision. I think I'm actually favored towards taking Sword for the Sky King here, even though you know your board is likely to get cleaned up next turn. It's very clear, since you know your opponent is still holding a Desert Marshal, that they, outside of one card that you don't have good information on, it's unlikely that they're going to have some sort of threat or win condition, whereas you most certainly do in the last towards that.
Yeah, that's a good point. That certainly is true. I think that Zooch is just playing in such a way to try and maximize, and taking the Harsh Rule rather allows them to maintain some type of board that can help protect the last word from this Desert Marshal and potential other things like the Sword of the Sky King.
Yeah, that is fair. I guess Zooch actually did make the decision, since he had the Scorpion Wasp. He was able to eat the first hit of the sword, so the sword will only really get the Shadowlands Feaster. And let's see, Suburb picking up Lightning Storm, the least interesting of the 3 cards VSarius had in his hand.
Yeah, it would have been a pretty big deal to hit either the Marshal or the Seraph. Marshal would be able to answer the remaining Seraph, and Seraph provides an additional win condition. Both of those would be powerful.
Yeah, both those are very powerful. VSarius just going ahead and clearing off this Feaster right now with the Sword of the Sky King. And in a decent position now. Gonna see, yeah, he's gonna go ahead and get this Seraph down. And I do like that, although Zooch finding the immediate answer rips the Suffocate off the top to clean it up. And
yes.
VSarius definitely light on interaction right now.
Yeah, ZoochZ is just trying to maneuver the game to a point where they can leverage this last word. They still need the other power to actually cast it, but even if they didn't have it, it's still like a little awkward with this Desert Marshal kind of gumming things up.
Yeah, and we see it attack with the Steward of Prophecy trying to get in. He ends up getting traded out, unsurprisingly, with the Seraph, but ZoochZ is able to establish this Steward of the Past now, going from one Steward to another, and he is going to be able to start putting some pressure on here, although VSarius picking up a harsh roll might just elect to clear the board off. Otherwise, we'll probably permafrost this.
I'm not sure you need to pull the trigger right now. It would be defensible if you did, but I think you can wait. You could also permafrost the Steward. I think I personally would have just taken 4 that turn, given them like a turn to see what I draw, see what they draw. But the permafrost there is certainly defensible.
Oh, and that was a pretty big pickup with the Subvert. I'm not sure which card he wanted to see more, but Desert Marshal's certainly going to be a strong pickup.
Yeah, definitely. He gets to free up this 5/5, provide a pretty reasonable clock. It will force VSarius to pull the trigger on this harsh roll. But then the last word gets to come down and maybe close up this game.
Yeah, very likely will get to harsh roll. We're going to come down here. We're going to see a last word in response. VSarius going to have to decide, yeah, it doesn't put the Seraph down on the board. So his out is going to be Seraph into some really sweet activations.
And this is a really bad spot for VSarius, because the last word is exceptional in empty board, because no one threat can deal. You have to play 2 creatures, because it's just going to keep mowing down like these single creatures that VSarius plays, and that's all he really has access to. So I'm not sure how he gets out of this spot. Does he have anything in his deck that can do direct damage?
I'm not entirely sure. I don't honestly think so. So I think he's gonna have to. Yeah, as out, he probably would have had to find some sort of weapon, but we had already seen Sword of the Sky King go by the wayside. So yeah, ZoochZ gonna end up getting game 1 there with the last word and just some value trading back and forth on the board. And that was a very interesting game 1, seeing how the 2 control decks want to interact with each other. And the Xenon Killers deck is really that's quite interesting.
Yeah, and ZoochZ's list is actually engineered like pretty well against control with the like Zendel's Gift, last word, even the subverts. He has a lot of game against decks trying to slow things down, and that last word is just such an overpowering threat against decks like VSarius's that can only deploy like 1 big creature a turn. Yeah,
very true. Let's take a look at these players' sideboards. We have, and I gotta go to ZoochZ first, because like this Xenon control deck is pretty spicy. I want to see what the sideboard is packing. Looks like he's got a Dark Return, single Annihilate, 2 Decays, 4 Plagues, 1 Death Strike, 3 Lumen Defenders, 2 Stray and a Shadow, and a Shadowlands Feaster.
The only things I'm interested in here are really like the Dark Return, the Shadowlands Feaster, and possibly the 2 Decays for the opposing Zendel's Gift. Outside of that, there's not a lot else. The Shadowlands Feaster and Decay the Shadowlands Feaster and the Dark Return, rather, providing additional threats. Shadowlands Feaster is very potent as a flash threat in this matchup. And Decay, obviously taking out the Zendel's Gift, which could potentially steal a game from underneath ZoochZ.
Yeah, definitely. Zendel's Gift, always very powerful. Will be interesting. Probably see that Shadowlands Feaster come in, as an additional threat. Might also see... probably like maybe an Annihilate, a Dark Return. There's actually probably not the Annihilate. There aren't a lot of great single faction cards, it seems. But we are jumping back in, unfortunately. So we will see what changes the 2 players made. Definitely Rain of Frogs and Decay right there in that opening hand for VSarius coming in. Yeah. And we see him mulligan into a much, much cleaner hand, given that this one actually has power in it.
Yeah, he doesn't have anything to do for the foreseeable future. The Wisdom might clean that up. This, by the way, gives him enough power to cast whatever he does end up getting moving forward. But we might see ZoochZ take initiative here, and VSarius might be able to do anything about it.
Yeah, ZoochZ is definitely going to take control of this game fast, since we do see that Azandul's gift hanging out in his hand. And, ooh, even a Seraph if he really wanted to get aggressive here, but definitely going to take the slower game plan, and that's pretty reasonable. ZoochZ, on the other hand, going ahead and using this scheme to pick up a Sandstorm Titan for the following turn.
Yeah, ZoochZ's hand is incredibly threat dense right now, and VSarius doesn't really have. They only have the permafrost right now. They do have the harsh rolls they could draw into later. They picked up a Throne Warden and a Desert Marshal off of that Wisdom, but ZoochZ is going to be presenting a lot of potent threats in the coming turns. We'll see if VSarius draws what he needs to deal with them.
Yeah, certainly. And go ahead and picking up a Time Sigil here, and then he's going to go ahead and fire off the Secret Power as well. I assume this will get the Shadow, and it does indeed, since he will need to cast that as Azandul's gift on turn 5. We see
Steward of Prophecy doing a lot of work here. This card is like very powerful.
Yeah, a very tough choice here for all of these targets. I feel like are pretty acceptable here. Throne Warden is very annoying to remove. Desert Marshal is very bad against your threats, since you have a lot of awkwardly costed and statted units that are relying on very powerful effects. Seraph also a very annoying target, and we do see the Desert Marshal get silenced there by the Steward.
Yeah, I think that choice is really between the Seraph and the Desert Marshal. The Throne Warden doesn't tangle with any of the creatures in your hand. Seraph is a thing that might be problematic going late. The Desert Marshal answers the Mystic Ascendant in your hand and the Stewards. So I think the Desert Marshal was a reasonable pick there.
I do as well. And we see VSarius just trying to grind this game out to turn 7, where he can drop this as Azandul's gift and hopefully take over. And ZoochZ definitely going to need to start committing things to not just get very, very destroyed by. No, it is definitely coming down on turn 7 now. VSarius can get it into play.
Yeah, ZoochZ is going to be forced to unload all this stuff, and if VSarius ever draws a harsh roll, they kind of get to put ZoochZ in the clamps, where they can do the combo of Azandul's gift, force you to unload your hand, and then harsh roll away the rest. Right now, he only has one side of that, but if he ever draws the second, it's going to be hard for ZoochZ to make some progress moving forward.
Yeah, and we see an attack there by ZoochZ pushing all in with his units, and we see VSarius trying to make a double block that unfortunately does not work out well at all for him. ZoochZ getting hit with the Azandul's gift, though, throwing out the Curses emote, which is fairly appropriate because for his deck, since he is on a control deck, Azandul's gift is a very tough card to deal with. This is definitely going to give a lot of room for VSarius to take this game back. Definitely, if he could fall, he would be 100% back in this game, if not just absolutely in the driver's seat.
Yeah, he's like having to deal with a pretty potent board right now, but that Azandul's gift was a 5-for-1, and he rips harsh roll right off the top. Now the game is going to be firmly in his hands. He gets to play the Seraph. If he draws another power in the oh no, that was actually the 8th power. So he's going to be able to start ulting it next turn, and ZoochZ only has their top card to deal with, and he just decides to not even play it out. He's just going
yeah, I think that's probably a smart concession as ZoochZ. He realizes that this sort of minimum of 1 turn, and that's probably just too much. He's never going to be able to build up a hand, so he's going to be very at the mercy of his deck, and that will even the series up at 1 game apiece between these two control decks. Two very interesting builds between 4 Faction and Xenon. ZoochZ, let's take a look while we have a second at the sideboard cards that VSarius most likely brought in. We did see a few of them, so we have a little bit of insight. We see an Island's Favor, a Lightning Storm, 2 Lightning Strikes, 4 Decays, 2 Scorpion Wasps, 2 Rain of Frogs, 2 Black Sky Harbingers, and a Mistveiled Drake. Frog and at least a Decay or 2, possibly some Scorpion Wasps,
yeah,
but haven't seen anything else yet.
The Mistveiled Drake is the Aegis blocks opposing subverts, sabotages, or stuff like that. It's also just a hard threat to deal with for ZoochZ as a 6/6 Aegis.
Yeah, very true. We might have also seen the other Island's Favor come in the decks since we have seen 2 in the starting hands now. Quite possible there's a second one in the deck to make it a little easier to hit that. Slower-ish start out of VSarius, going to spend his first few turns just drawing up power, but an even slower start out of ZoochZ.
Yeah, he's very fortunate to draw that shadow off the top, which he did not have previously. And even with that, he's still just kind of spinning his tires for the next 2 turns. He will get to Subvert or Prophecy on turn 4, which is a pretty good play in this matchup.
Yeah, definitely is going to be a good play. We'll see what kind of units VSarius is working with, or really what he goes into this turn. I'm not sure if he's actually going to commit the Titan down first. You generally would, and he does choose to, but the Annihilate that we see ZoochZ holding is obviously going to take care of this Titan, no problem.
Yeah, Annihilate getting its tempo value there is huge. And I would expect to see the Steward here, and we do. You want to save Subvert until the later portion of the game, because you're likely to hit power now, especially because ZoochZ knows that VSarius has a Find the Way in hand because it's the only card in his deck with Echo.
Yeah, this is very true. So you that is something like really important to note that you just kind of pointed out is you can very often tell when players draw Find the Way in these decks that are playing time, because there really aren't almost any Echo cards played in the format, and whenever you see those Echoes go off, you can always assume that it's going to be a Find the Way, and you will generally be correct.
Yeah, and we see ZoochZ does fire off the Subvert there, only gets a land, although that land does get them closer to this Shadowlands Feaster and Last Word, which are very potent threats that VSarius is not really equipped to deal with right now.
Yeah, VSarius just kind of running out of gas here, unfortunately, and we see that he's running out of gas anytime soon, so VSarius is going to need a big top deck here, and Seat is not what he was looking for, so it's time for this Mystic Ascendant to get out of control.
Yeah, ZoochZ is just going to present like so many threats in diverse ways that I'm not sure. VSarius needs to draw like pretty close to perfect to like answer this Mystic Ascendant and answer this Last Word, and then the flash threat from the Shadowlands Feaster. The angles, it's going to be very hard for VSarius to deal with.
Yeah, and I don't think VSarius is actually going to have a way to get past this, and the Desert Marshal Silence here is, interestingly enough, actually like definitely the better of the lines here, but I'm not sure it's really going to matter in the end. Yeah, ZoochZ probably just going to he can choose to go ahead and Mystic Ascendant for value, but he's also definitely has a big consideration here of just dropping the Shadowlands Feaster. That way he can dodge the Harsh Rule this turn, which we do see VSarius just picked up. So Harsh Rule going to clear off these Mystic Ascendants. Yeah,
it was interesting choice ZoochZ had that. And Mystic Ascendant Feaster does insulate him from the Harsh Rule that is going to likely come down here.
Yeah,
but it was a very close decision. The Feaster, like getting the value from your power in hand, is certainly worth it. He gets to cycle that where he otherwise might not have been able to. So I understand it.
Yeah, that is a fair point. Cycling power is definitely important, trying to actually draw into useful threats. We saw VSarius pick up a second Harsh Rule, so ZoochZ is going to have to be careful when establishing a board, but it looks like he is on this Last Word game plan, and he's just going to ambush in the Shadowlands Feaster and force VSarius to deal with it while he drops the Last Word next turn and establishes his win con.
Yeah, this 1-2 punch is incredibly potent, and even with the Desert Marshal to like quote-unquote answer the Shadowlands Feaster, this Last Word is just going to probably just run roughshod over the game again. This is just an incredibly powerful card in this matchup.
Yeah, I feel like you almost just kind of have to keep the Desert Marshal hanging back for the Last Word right now. But, Steward of the Prophecy very smartly fired off first. So that will take care of the silence on the Desert Marshal and the ambush. And now VSarius is going to have the ability to Harsh Rule next turn to try and stall this board out, but we obviously see the Last Word hang out, and ZoochZ hand is going to make it very difficult for VSarius to actually win this game.
Yeah, very astute play by ZoochZ, knowing that the way he is winning this game is with Last Word. The only card that interacts with Last Word is Desert Marshal. So he's just going to throw out that Steward. It's not getting better. Like any creature they draw, they're likely to play except for Desert Marshal. So they get the value there, and will be able to deploy this Last Word, or even possibly the Sandstorm Titan next turn. We'll see how conservative they want to play.
Yeah, interesting that he has he doesn't play the Desert Marshal here, although it would just get cleaned up by the last words. So probably smarter to hold it since he's going to need to establish multiple threats. And Zooch just going all in with these two Sandstorm Titans, saying, show me your third harsh rule. And unfortunately for VSarius, he doesn't have a third harsh rule to show.
Yeah, this is an excellent spot for Zooch. He got to force all this pressure with Sandstorm Titans, and now here's the last word, which is the real threat. Like, when you get to play two Sandstorm Titans as red herrings, that's a pretty good spot to be.
Yeah, it definitely is a good spot to be in here. So VSarius is going to have to hit a harsh rule off the top here. And Permafrost not going to do it, and that since that Desert Marshal is silenced, not going to be of any help either. And Zooch is actually going to take this series 2-1 with his Xenon control over the 4-faction control deck VSarius brought. And who knows, maybe in tournament format, Xenon control is the real deal. I believe this takes Zooch to 4-1, so clearly like he's been having excellent results with the deck. And I mean, those were two fairly convincing games right there.
Yeah, I think Xenon Control has a lot of game against pretty much everything. You have all of the removal from Shadow. You have pretty potent threats with Mystic Ascendant, Sandstorm Titan, Steward of Prophecy as well. You have the best cards against the other slower decks in Last Word and Azandel's Gift. This deck seems to have just a lot of tools to deal with whatever you need to. And in a tournament format where you have access to a sideboard, you just get to bring all of them to bear.
Yeah, absolutely true. And that was an interesting set of games. Like I said, like the Xenon Killers deck definitely impressed me. And yeah, I like we were saying, maybe this is the format for it. Maybe tournament is where Xenon finds its home while it's still an unsupported faction. I can't wait to see when Xenon actually gets the multicolor support that all the other factions have at this point. Well, the first 5 we've gotten.
Yeah, the quote-unquote allied color combinations.
Yeah, the allied pairings of factions. I can't wait to see the enemy pairings where we get Xenon, since it seems like between this and a couple other decks we've already seen, Xenon clearly has a very solid power level in its base 2 factions without actually having any multicolor cards. So who knows? Maybe Xenon will be the deck to beat once we actually get their multi-faction cards.
Yeah, it really doesn't seem to have a lot of holes, and like any additional help it could get would be very potent. I'm just like incredibly impressed by the Last Word. If you could just play a deck where you whittle down your opponent to just a couple cards, and that deck actually has access to Stray and a Shadow now to take care of things going wide, like this is definitely an archetype that I think we're going to see a lot moving forward now that it's on people's radar. Like it definitely has the tools to compete.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think some inclusions. I think some inclusions like Shadowlands Feaster were important. I'm assuming the deck probably also plays Stray into Shadows. I could look it up really quick because I would like to be sure, since it is a relatively new list.
Looks like it was sideboarding 2 of them.
Yeah, it looks like they're sideboard. They probably don't need to be main board, but yeah, definitely, obviously, the new inclusion of Shadowlands Feaster in the main board helping out a little bit. Ooh, he actually did have Decay in the main board. Interesting. He's definitely trying to equip himself against all types of decks, and it looks like he has managed to do that pretty well to this point. So big props to Zooch, not only for getting that game 2-1, but also just for building a really sweet deck. Like I think all of us can appreciate that he's definitely gone out of his way a little bit to innovate this cool little Xenon control deck, and it's definitely it seems to be working out really well for him. So I hope we see him in the top 8.
Yeah, certainly. I'm excited to play around with that archetype myself.